Book Talk begins at 13 minutes and 40 seconds. Cranford begins at episode 679. Welcome to CraftLit, the podcast for crafters who love books. My name is Heather Ordover, and I'm podcasting from where the Delaware River meets the Old York Road, New Hope, Pennsylvania. Episode 689, Make Do. This episode of CraftLit is brought to you by our marvelous supporters at Patreon, our premium members on our CraftLit app and at craftlit.com/premium, and our YouTube channel members. Thank you all so much. We could not do this without you. This week, we would like to highlight Chantal Yang, Allison Jennings-Roche, Cindy Barrick, Diana Jablonski, Sonia Lee, and we would like to welcome new patrons, Regina Daly and Kathy. Thank you. Well, hello, how are you? I'm tired. Last time I spoke to you, I mentioned that I was very excited that I was going down to Washington, D.C. to see the play Frankenstein at the Shakespeare Theater. And we got to 45 minutes outside of D.C. when my car blew up. And it was epic. It took, let's see, that was Saturday at 10 a.m. and I didn't get home until Tuesday morning at 2 a.m. It was long. I do have to say this. We found a lovely mechanic and his entire family just outside of Baltimore, just south, and they took very good care of me, including towing my car and me all the way back to our mechanic here at home. It was very late at night, and it was actually kind of wonderful because I said, I'm gonna knit for a little while, but I know I'm gonna pass out." And they're like, "That's fine. Go to sleep. No problem. Can I listen to music?" And I'm like, "God, of course you can listen to music. I have earbuds. I can listen to a book and put myself to sleep. No biggie." He was playing Indian music that was really, really loud and had a really loud bass track. And so when I had the book in my ears, which is a book that I'd listened to before so I could fall asleep to it, the rhythm of the music just that plus, the road absolutely lulled me to sleep. I slept the entire way back to our mechanics. It was marvelous. So even though I got in at 2 a.m., I had gone to sleep probably at, 11, which is, it could be worse. But as you might imagine, that pretty much did me in for the rest of the week. So I am still recovering, and light and screens are still very painful for me. So if you're watching on YouTube, that is why you are not seeing me right now. But car's dead. It's a brick. It's a very, very expensive paperweight or planter, as Andrew likes to think of it. And I don't know what's going to happen, but we'll live with one. It's not like I drive that far that often anyway. So fine. Come on, universe. Keep it coming. We'll just keep rolling with it. But let's see, this month we still have our raffle items from Erin. These are the foundation paper piecing quilt patterns. We have a link to how to FPP on the craftlit.com show notes. For this episode, it would be craftlit.com/689. Those are still available. Remember, there's no reason not to enter the raffle because we have 3 completely different patterns, and you could win one of 3. So there'll be 3 winners this month, and we'll send that on to you. And I'm so excited. I did, I did print out the pattern and the instructions for the free book tracker pattern that Erin sent, and that was my plan for last weekend. So that didn't happen because I was in a hotel the whole time. I didn't have my sewing machine. I did have hand sewing. I worked on pangolin stuff, but yeah, that was something that did not go to plan. What does? I mean, honestly. All right. Do not forget to send us your crafty videos. And I have a secondary shout out to give, or call out, I guess, to give. And it is this. I was talking to some podcasting friends over the weekend, and we are all feeling the very same vibe. Like, things are shifting, nobody's happy, everything's miserable for lots and lots of reasons. But just within the podcasting space, things have changed so dramatically since the early days. And I continue to get lovely, lovely emails from you. Thank you. But we are very slowly starting to get some crafty videos of you and your hands doing things that you would like us to attach, like your Etsy store to or your local guild. But then it occurred to me, guilds, groups, stores that have groups. This is important information right now. Everybody is so isolated. Everybody is so separated. And online is great in a pinch, but it still feels very distancing if everything in the world is on Zoom. Podcasts are one thing because you stick them in your ear and I'm there with you, and that's great. But getting together with human people seems to me to be more important now than ever. So, if you are a member of a guild, if you are a member of a group, if you are a member of, I don't know, fill in the blank for me, please. But if you have localized event thing that happens within the crafting world, could be knitting, could be crochet, could be spinning, could be weaving, could be jewelry making, anything, welding. Heck, let's get some welders in there. If you have anything and you would like people who move to your area who are interested in the same thing as you to know where to go to find more people who are interested in the same thing, please contact me. Use that same form, the form that we've got in the show notes for sending crafty videos to us. Because in that form, you can say, I don't have a video, but I do have this guild or this group or this venue. Let us know everything you know about it, like who runs it, if you know phone number, email address, whatever. I'm going to try and get a hold of these people and do little what's up videos on YouTube that I can compile into longer podcasts. So they'll be kind of shorts or extended shorts over on YouTube, but we'll save the audio and put them all together as one-off podcast interviews. Maybe we'll do it by like the part of the world or the part of the country where these groups are localized so that people can go, oh, I'm moving to the Southwest. What's there? But that way people get a little bit of an introduction. They can move to a place or find people in a place where they were feeling isolated. And I mean, nobody's better than you guys. So I couldn't believe it took me this long to think about it. But let's become the clearinghouse for all things crafty, all crafts that are crafty, and ways for people to do these things together. So that was one part of my make do theme for this week's episode. The other thing was Stephanie Canada, who is a really hilarious and utterly ridiculous in the best kind of way YouTuber who does a lot of vintage pattern making. She buys and sells vintage patterns, she buys and sells vintage fabric. She also is kind of a rebel sewist. She's just crazy, but in a very, very good way. She has a thing on her coffee. It looks like Kofi, but I know it has to be pronounced coffee because their icon is a coffee mug. On her coffee for the original United States booklet of Make Do for Victory. Now in the UK, it was Make Do and Mend. Here it was Make Do for Victory. There is so much information in this booklet, and she's got it done as a high-res download. It is free. You go in and you act like you're gonna pay for it, but it's for $0.00. So you just go through that, and then you get the download link. Amazing. I'm linking you to the video where she talks about it, and then from there you can go to her coffee page and search for it. I will tell you, it is easier to find if you do this on a computer or a laptop or even maybe a tablet. But if you're on a phone, the real estate that you can see is very small, and it's a little harder to find the Make Do for Victory booklet. Much easier on a screen. So that was one thing. The other thing I wanted to share with you is an antique pattern library. This has patterns going back to, Weldon's days and actually maybe even earlier than that. I'm trying to remember. But it has crochet, it has lace, it has sewing, it has netting, netting, which Leanne had talked about. It has patterns for all of these things, dozens. I don't know, maybe hundreds. I didn't stay on the site that long because my brain started to bleed. It's amazing. It's like it felt like the old internet when people just said, "Ooh, I've got this neat stuff. Here, let me put it up so other people can find the neat stuff too." Doesn't cost anything. It's nothing's for sale. It's just a pattern library. And that made me very, very happy. Along with finding that though, I found I found a link to a cursing dictionary from a long it's not cursing, it's like a slang dictionary, but it's from, I believe, the late 1800s. I have to go back and look again. But it's on Gutenberg. I'd never seen it before. Somebody who was involved with the Antique Pattern Library linked out to it. I opened it up, and the very top thing is a cadger's map of a begging district. And I was like, "Oh my gosh, it's Oliver. It's from Food Glorious Food. Can we beg, can we borrow, or cadge?" I remember in high school singing this, because reasons. We didn't do Oliver, it was a whole thing. But I was always like, "What is this cadge?" And I finally kind of figured it out from context, but I don't think I've ever seen the word written down again since my freshman year in high school. So the cadger's map of a begging district is the thing that starts the slang dictionary. It's on Gutenberg. It's free, obviously. We linked out to it from the show notes, and that just made me happy. It's fun to see what used to be slang, is what I'm saying. Last thing before we get to the book talk is this. I got an email from someone who has switched over to the CraftLit.com premium membership, who has gone back and is listening to Wuthering Heights and has discovered this issue. Listening on a tablet, the tablet is not remembering where she left off. So it'll reload the page and it'll start over at 0. And that's a problem because we've all been there, and it's annoying. And of course, if you're on a tablet, you don't always have an easy way to remember, or if you get interrupted, you're not going to look. The first thing you're going to do is not look down and look at the time code of what you're doing. So my question to you is this: has anybody else had this problem? 2, has anybody else fixed this problem? 3, is anybody else out there who has a WordPress site and has found a player that will, I guess, use cookies that I can use on the craftlit.com site? I hadn't noticed this problem, but that may be because I was on a desktop instead of a tablet, but the tablet issue is an issue. So, yeah, let me know thoughts if you can. Heather at craftlit.com or 206-350-1642, because that is troubling, and I want to make sure we fix that. Also, if you notice that she also mentioned this, she had noticed that the audio in at least 2 of the episodes in the last month or so, the audio had been really low, and we're trying to figure out what was going on. I normalize my audio, send it to the editors. They put it through one more normalization process, which is standardized. Like it should not be changing the volume level. So if you're noticing that this happens, let us know as soon as you notice, because something has gone horribly, horribly wrong and we need to fix it. All right, here we go. Book talk. So last week, we had the panic where everybody lost their mind, fearing for their lives and their silver. That ended with Miss Pole kind of getting herself back into my good graces by paying extra so that Miss Maddie could be carried in the sedan chair home in a way that was less bouncy jouncy, which I liked. This week, we have a different chapter. It's still connected. I said that there was a rotation of 3. This is the third of 3. It started with Signor Brunoni, then it went to the panic, and now we're here at our third, which is Samuel Brown. I don't know how I feel about this chapter in its entirety. I have lots of feels, and I can't tease them all apart. So I'm looking forward to hearing what you have to say about the chapter. There's not a lot that you need from me in advance, except this. A sanded parlor is if you had a house that was big enough to have something that could function as a parlor, but you were still so poor that you didn't have hardwood or flagstone floors, you would have a brushed dirt parlor. That happened a lot in things like sod houses and places in the middle part of the United States back Laura Ingalls Wilder time-ish. However, sanded parlors could also be if you had wood, but it wasn't great wood, and you put the sand down, that's one reason you might have sand on the floor. The other one is because you might have flagstones, and the sand, again, is there to kind of fill in the grooves between the flagstones. The third reason that sand is a good idea to have around is if you drip anything on the floor, it's much easier to sweep up the sand and just spread it around and get rid of it. It's like when I worked in the shop at UCLA, we had the sawdust bin, and if you got grease or anything on the floor, you go grab a handful of this sawdust, and it had been treated with something because it was a little sticky. You throw the sawdust on the floor, let it soak for a bit, and then use a broom, and it sweeps up so easily. So that's all it is. It's just letting you know that this is not a very, very poor home, but it's also not, Mrs. Jameson's house. A mountebank, I think we got this a couple weeks ago. Mountebank is like a highway robber. Jacks up, or a fig for his heels, or saying pref instead of preference. These are all examples of slang, and we know how we feel about slang in Cranford. Oh dear. Don't forget the Duke of Wellington was a much loved gentleman. He was famous for his work in the Napoleonic Wars. He survived them, unlike Nelson. And yeah, people loved him. The end. Lord Chesterfield's letters. So in 1774, Lord Chesterfield's letters were published posthumously. They were written by Philip Dormer Stanhope, the 4th Earl of Chesterfield. He died in 1773. At the time, these letters were mostly instructions on etiquette that were written to his son. They were very popular for a while, but as tastes changed, they fell out of favor. Dr. Johnson described them as teaching, I am not kidding, this is a quote I got, the morals of a whore and the manners of a dancing master. Now, we know Cranford is always behind the times. This is one of those interesting places where they're behind the times. It's not just they're in love with Samuel Johnson, which is behind the times, but they're also even behind his times at this point. So when they're praising Lord Chesterfield's letters, they're way out of date. Bread jelly. I looked this up. I have a recipe for you. It is in fact what it says it is. It's taking bread and kind of boiling it until it becomes glutinous and jelly-like, and all the starch becomes kind of bleh. And then you pass it through a sieve to strain it. You add some sugar and maybe some fruit or fruit juice. And I'm still horrified. I don't know how I feel about this, but apparently it's a thing that you could give to people who are not feeling well because it would be very easy on their stomach. I am disturbed somehow. Has anybody had this? Bread jelly? It seems to have been like a thing in England and in colonial America. There are recipes. So my great grandmother never gave it to me. She would have been my only source. I don't know. Do buckle in for some lovely comedy about our previous chapters' behaviors, about all the ladies, and some really, truly beautiful and heartwarming, if not heartbreaking, moments with Miss Maddie in today's chapter. There's some beautiful things that happen. And I think we've had this before. Charges are sermons. Charges are like a charge or an exhortation to the people who are sitting there in church. Something that a priest or a minister would give. All right, that's it. Like I said, not a lot today. It's everything that we needed to know, we learned in the last 2 chapters. So here we go with Chapter 11 of Cranford by Elizabeth Gaskell. If you are not listening to Noel Badrian reading the book for us today, please fast wind to all right, 47.
Chapter 11 of Cranford by Elizabeth Gaskell. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Noel Badrian. Samuel Brown. The next morning I met Lady Glenmire and Miss Pole setting out on a long walk to find some old woman who was famous in the neighbourhood for her skill in knitting woolen stockings. Miss Pole said to me, with a smile half kindly and half contemptuous upon her countenance, I have been just telling Lady Glenmire of our poor friend Mrs. Forrester and her terror of ghosts. It comes from living so much alone and listening to the bugaboo stories of that Jenny of hers. She was so calm and so much above superstitious fears herself that I was almost ashamed to say how glad I had been of her Headingley Causeway proposition the night before, and turned off the conversation to something else. In the afternoon Miss Pole called on Miss Matty to tell her of the adventure, the real adventure they had met with on their morning's walk. They had been perplexed about the exact path which they were to take across the fields in order to find the knitting old woman, and had stopped to inquire at a little wayside public-house standing on the high road to London, about 3 miles from Cranford. The good woman had asked them to sit down and rest themselves while she fetched her husband, who could direct them better than she could, and while they were sitting in the sanded parlour, a little girl came in. They thought that she belonged to the landlady, and began some trifling conversation with her, but, on Mrs. Roberts's return, she told them that the little thing was the only child of a couple who were staying in the house, and then she began a long story, out of which Lady Glanmire and Miss Pole could only gather 1 or 2 decided facts, which were that, about 6 weeks ago, a light spring cart had broken down just before their door, in which there were 2 men, 1 woman, and this child. One of the men was seriously hurt, no bones broken, only shaken, the landlady called it, but he had probably sustained some severe internal injury, for he had languished in their house ever since, attended by his wife, the mother of this little girl. Miss Pole had asked what he was, what he looked like, and Mrs. Roberts had made answer that he was not like a gentleman, nor yet like a common person. If it had not been that he and his wife were such decent, quiet people, she could almost have thought he was a mountebank, or something of the kind, for they had a great box in the cart, full of she did not know what. She had helped to unpack it and take out their linen and clothes, when the other man, his twin brother she believed he was, had gone off with the horse and cart. Miss Pole had begun to have her suspicions at this point, and expressed her idea that it was rather strange that the box and cart and horse and all should have disappeared. But good Mrs. Roberts seemed to have become quite indignant at Miss Pole's implied suggestion. In fact, Miss Pole said, she was as angry as if Miss Pole had told her that she herself was a swindler. As the best way of convincing the ladies, she bethought her of begging them to see the wife, and, as Miss Pole said, there was no doubting the honest, worn, bronze face of the woman, who, at the first tender words from Lady Glanmire, burst into tears, which she was too weak to check, until some word from the landlady made her swallow down her sobs, in order that she might testify to the Christian kindness shown by Mr. and Mrs. Roberts. Miss Pole came round with a swing to as vehement a belief in the sorrowful tale as she had been sceptical before, and, as a proof of this, her energy in the poor sufferer's behalf was nothing daunted when she found out that he, and no other, was our Signor Brunoni, to whom all Cranford had been attributing all manner of evil this 6 weeks past. Yes, his wife said his proper name was Samuel Brown. Sam, she called him, but to the last we preferred calling him the Signor. It sounded so much better. The end of their conversation with the Signora Brunoni was that it was agreed that he should be placed under medical advice, and for any expense incurred in procuring this, Lady Glanmire promised to hold herself responsible, and had accordingly gone to Mr. Hoggins to beg him to ride over to the Rising Sun that very afternoon, and examine into the Signor's real state. And, as Miss Pole said, if it was desirable to remove him to Cranford to be more immediately under Mr. Hoggins's eye, she would undertake to seek for lodgings and arrange about the rent. Mrs. Roberts had been as kind as could be all throughout, but it was evident that their long residence had been a slight inconvenience. Before Miss Pole left us, Miss Matty and I were as full of the morning's adventure as she was. We talked about it all the evening, turning it in every possible light, and we went to bed anxious for the morning, when we should surely hear from someone what Mr. Hoggins thought and recommended. For, as Miss Matty observed, though Mr. Hoggins did say Jack's up, and a fig for his heels, and called preference pref. She believed he was a very worthy man and a very clever surgeon. Indeed, we were rather proud of our doctor at Cranford as a doctor. We often wished, when we heard of Queen Adelaide or the Duke of Wellington being ill, that they would send for Mr. Hoggins. But, on consideration, we were rather glad they did not, for, if we were ailing, what would we do if Mr. Hoggins had been appointed physician in ordinary to the royal family? As a surgeon we were proud of him, but as a man, or rather, I should say, as a gentleman, we could only shake our heads over his name and himself, and wished that he had read Lord Chesterfield's letters, in the days when his manners were susceptible of improvement. Nevertheless, we all regarded his dictum in the signor's case as infallible, and when he said that with care and attention he might rally, we had no more fear for him. But although we had no more fear, everybody did as much as if there was a great cause for anxiety, as indeed there was until Mr. Hoggins took charge of him. Miss Pole looked out clean and comfortable, if homely, lodgings. Miss Matty sent the sedan chair for him, and Martha and I aired it well before it left Cranford by holding a warming pan full of red-hot coals in it, and shutting it up close, smoke and all, until the time when he should get into it at the rising sun. Lady Glanmire undertook the medical department under Mr. Hoggins's directions, and rummaged up all Mrs. Jameson's medicine glasses and spoons and bed-tables in a free and easy way that made Miss Matty feel a little anxious as to what that lady and Mr. Mulliner might say if they knew. Mrs. Forrester made some of the bread jelly for which she was so famous, to have ready as a refreshment in the lodgings when he should arrive. A present of this bread jelly was the highest mark of favour dear Mrs. Forrester could confer. Miss Pole had once asked her for the receipt, but she had met with a very decided rebuff. That lady told her that she could not part with it to anyone during her life, and that after her death it was bequeathed, as her executors would find, to Miss Matty. What Miss Matty, or, as Mrs. Forrester called her, remembering the clause in her will and the dignity of the occasion, Miss Matilda Jenkyns, might choose to do with the receipt when it came into her possession, whether to make it public or to hand it down as an heirloom, she did not know, nor would she dictate. And a mould of this admirable, digestible, unique bread jelly was sent by Mrs. Forrester to our poor sick conjurer. Who says that the aristocracy are proud? Here was a lady, by birth a Tyrrell, and descended from the great Sir Walter that shot King Rufus, and in whose veins ran the blood of him who murdered the little princes in the Tower, going every day to see what dainty dishes she could prepare for Samuel Brown, a mountebank. But, indeed, it was wonderful to see what kind feelings were called out by this poor man's coming among us, and also wonderful to see how the great Cranford panic, which had been occasioned by his first coming in his Turkish dress, melted away into thin air on his second coming, pale and feeble, and with heavy, filmy eyes, that only brightened a very little when they fell upon the countenance of his faithful wife, or their pale and sorrowful little girl. Somehow we all forgot to be afraid. I dare say it was that finding out that he, who had first excited our love of the marvellous by his unprecedented arts, had not sufficient everyday gifts to manage a shying horse, made us feel as if we were ourselves again. Miss Pole came with her little basket at all hours of the evening, as if her lonely house and the unfrequented road to it had never been infested by that murderous gang. Mrs. Forrester said she thought that neither Jenny nor she need mind the headless lady who wept and wailed in Darkness Lane, for surely the power was never given to such beings to harm those who went about to try to do what little good was in their power, to which Jenny tremblingly assented. But the mistress's theory had little effect on the maid's practice until she had sewn 2 pieces of red flannel in the shape of a cross on her inner garment. I found Miss Matty covering her penny ball, the ball that she used to roll under her bed with gay-coloured worsted in rainbow stripes. "My dear," said she, "my heart is so sad for that little careworn child. Although her father is a conjurer, she looks as if she has never had a good game of play in her life. I used to make very pretty balls in this way when I was a girl, and I thought I would try if I could not make this one smart and take it to Phoebe this afternoon. I think the gang must have left the neighbourhood, for one does not hear any more of their violence and robbery now." We were all of us far too full of the Signor's precarious state to talk either about robbers or ghosts. Indeed, Lady Glenmire said she never had heard of any actual robberies, except that 2 little boys had stolen some apples from Farmer Benson's orchard, and that some eggs had been missed on a market day off Widow Hayward's stall. But that was expecting too much of us. We could not acknowledge that we had only this small foundation for all our panic. Miss Pole drew herself up at this remark of Lady Glenmire's, and said that she wished she could agree with her as to the very small reason we had for alarm, but with the recollection of a man disguised as a woman who had endeavoured to force himself into her house while his confederates waited outside, with the knowledge gained from Lady Glenmire herself of the footprints seen on Mrs. Jameson's flower borders, with the fact before her of the audacious robbery committed on Mr. Hoggins at his own door. But here Lady Glenmire broke in with a very strong expression of doubt as to whether this last story was not an entire fabrication founded upon the theft of a cat. She grew so red while she was saying all this that I was not surprised at Miss Pole's manner of bridling up, and I am certain, if Lady Glenmire had not been her ladyship, we should have had a more emphatic contradiction than the "well, to be sure," and similar fragmentary ejaculations, which were all that she ventured upon in my lady's presence. But when she was gone, Miss Pole began a long congratulation to Miss Matty that so far they had escaped marriage, which she noticed always made people credulous to the last degree. Indeed, she thought it argued great natural credulity in a woman if she could not keep herself from being married. And in what Lady Glenmire had said about Mr. Hoggins's robbery, we had a specimen of what people came to if they gave way to such a weakness. Evidently Lady Glenmire would swallow anything if she could believe the poor vamped-up story about a neck of mutton and a pussy with which he had tried to impose on Miss Pole, only she had always been on her guard against believing too much of what men said. We were thankful, as Miss Pole desired us to be, that we had never been married. But I think, of the two, we were even more thankful that the robbers had left Cranford. At least I judge so from a speech of Miss Matty's that evening as we sat over the fire, in which she evidently looked upon her husband as a great protector against thieves, burglars, and ghosts, and said that she did not think that she should dare to be always warning young people against matrimony, as Miss Pole did continually. To be sure, marriage was a risk, as she saw, now she had some experience, but she remembered the time when she had looked forward to being married as much as anyone. "Not to any particular person, my dear," said she, hastily checking herself up, as if she were afraid of having admitted too much. "Only the old story, you know, of ladies always saying, 'when I marry,' and gentlemen, 'if I marry.'" It was a joke spoken in rather a sad tone, and I doubt if either of us smiled, but I could not see Miss Matty's face by the flickering firelight. In a little while she continued, "But after all I have not told you the truth. It is so long ago, and no one ever knew how much I thought of it at the time, unless, indeed, my dear mother guessed. But I may say that there was a time when I did not think I should have been only Miss Matty Jenkyns all my life. For even if I did meet with any one who wished to marry me now, and as Miss Pole says, one is never too safe, I could not take him. I hope he would not take it too much to heart, but I could not take him, or anyone but the person I once thought I should be married to, and he is dead and gone. And he never knew how it all came about that I said no, when I had thought many and many a time. Well, it's no matter what I thought. God ordains it all, and I am very happy, my dear. No one has such kind friends as I, continued she, taking my hand and holding it in hers. If I had never known of Mr. Holbrook, I could have said something in this pause, but as I had, I could not think of anything that would come in naturally, and so we both kept silent for a little time. My father once made us, she began, keep a diary in 2 columns. On one side we were to put down in the morning what we thought would be the course and events of the coming day, and at night we were to put down on the other side what really had happened. It would be to some people rather a sad way of telling their lives. A tear dropped down my hand at these words. I don't mean that mine has been sad, only to be very different to what I expected. I remember one winter's evening sitting over our bedroom fire with Deborah. I remember it as if it were yesterday, and we were planning our future lives. Both of us were planning, though only she talked about it. She said she should like to marry an archdeacon and write his charges. And you know, my dear, she never was married, and, for aught I know, she never spoke to an unmarried archdeacon in her life. I never was ambitious, nor could I have written charges, but I thought I could manage a house. My mother used to call me her right hand, and I was always so fond of little children. The shyest babies would stretch out their little arms to come to me when I was a girl. I was half my leisure time nursing in the neighbouring cottages. But I don't know how it was. When I grew sad and grave, which I did a year or 2 after this time, the little things drew back from me, and I am afraid I lost the knack, though I am just as fond of children as ever, and have a strange yearning at my heart whenever I see a mother with her baby in her arms. Nay, my dear, and by a sudden blaze which sprang up from the fall of the unstirred coals, I saw that her eyes were full of tears, gazing intently on some vision of what might have been. Do you know, I dream sometimes that I have a little child, always the same, a little girl of about 2 years old. She never grows older, though I have dreamt about her for many years. I don't think I ever dream of any words or sounds she makes. She is very noiseless and still, but she comes to me when she is very sorry or very glad, and I have wakened with the clasp of her dear little arms round my neck. Only last night, perhaps because I had gone to sleep thinking of this ball for Phoebe, my little darling came in my dream and put up her mouth to be kissed, just as I have seen real babies do to real mothers before going to bed. But all this is nonsense, dear. Only don't be frightened by Miss Pole from being married. I can fancy it may be a very happy state, and a little credulity helps one on through life very smoothly. Better than always doubting and seeing difficulties and disagreeables in everything. If I had been inclined to be daunted from matrimony, it would not have been Miss Pole to do it. It would have been the lot of poor Signor Brunoni and his wife. And yet again it was an encouragement to see how, through all their cares and sorrows, they thought of each other and not of themselves, and how keen were their joys if they only passed through each other or through the little Phoebe. The Signora told me one day a good deal about their lives up to this period. It began by my asking her whether Miss Pole's story of the twin brothers was true. It sounded so wonderful a likeness that I should have had my doubts, if Miss Pole had not been unmarried. But the Signora, or, as we found out she preferred to be called, Mrs. Brown, said it was quite true, that her brother-in-law was by many taken for her husband, which was of great assistance to them in their profession. Though, she continued, How people can mistake Thomas for the real Signor Brunoni, I can't conceive, but he says they do, so I suppose I must believe him. Not but what he is a very good man, I am sure. I don't know how we should have paid our bill at the Rising Sun, but for the money he sends. But people must know very little about art if they can take him for my husband. Why, miss, in the ball trick, where my husband spreads his fingers wide and throws out his little finger with quite an air and grace, Thomas just clumps up his hand like a fist, and might have ever so many balls hidden in it. Besides, he has never been in India, and knows nothing of the proper sit of a turban. "Have you been in India?" said I, rather astonished. "Oh, yes, many a year, ma'am. Sam was a sergeant in the 31st, and when the regiment was ordered to India, I drew a lot to go, and I was more thankful than I can tell, for it seemed as if it would only be a slow death to me to part from my husband. But indeed, ma'am, if I had known all, I don't know whether I would not rather have died there and then than gone through what I have done since. To be sure, I've been able to comfort Sam and to be with him, but, ma'am, I've lost 6 children," said she, looking up at me with those strange eyes that I've never noticed but in mothers of dead children, with a kind of wild look in them, as if seeking for what they never more might find. Yes, 6 children died off, like little buds nipped untimely in that cruel India. I thought, as each died, I never could, I never would, love a child again. And when the next came, it had not only its own love, but the deeper love that came from the thoughts of its little dead brothers and sisters. And when Phoebe was coming, I said to my husband, "Sam, when the child is born, and I am strong, I shall leave you. It will cut my heart cruel, but if this baby dies too, I shall go mad. The madness is in me now. But if you let me go down to Calcutta, carrying my baby step by step, it will maybe work itself off. And I will save, and I will hoard, and I will beg, and I will die, to get a passage home to England, where our baby may live." God bless him, he said I might go, and he saved up his pay, and I saved up every pice I could get for washing or any way. And when Phoebe came, and I grew strong again, I set off. It was very lonely, through the thick forests, dark again with their heavy trees, along by the river's side. But I had been brought up near the Avon in Warwickshire, so that flowing noise sounded like home. From station to station, from Indian village to village, I went along carrying my child. I had seen one of the officers' ladies with a little picture, ma'am, done by a Catholic foreigner, ma'am, of the Virgin and the little Saviour, ma'am. She had him on her arm, and her form was softly curled round him, and their cheeks touched. Well, when I went to bid good-bye to this lady for whom I had washed, she cried sadly, for she too had lost her children, but she had not another to save like me. And I was bold enough to ask her, would she give me that print? And she cried the more, and said her children were with the little blessed Jesus, and gave it me, and told me she had heard it had been painted on the bottom of a cask, which made it have that round shape. And when my body was very weary, and my heart was sick, for there were times when I misdoubted if I could ever reach my home, and there were times when I thought of my husband, and one time when I thought my baby was dying, I took out that picture and looked at it, till I could have thought the mother spoke to me and comforted me. And the natives were very kind. We could not understand one another, but they saw my baby on my breast, and they came out to me and brought me rice and milk, and sometimes flowers. I have got some of the flowers dried. Then, the next morning, I was so tired, and they wanted me to stay with them, I could tell that, and tried to frighten me from going into the deep woods, which indeed looked very strange and dark. But it seemed to me as if death was following me to take my baby away from me, and as if I must go on and on, And I thought how God had cared for mothers ever since the world was made, and would care for me. So I bade them good-bye and set off afresh. And once, when my baby was ill, and both she and I needed rest, he led me to a place where I found a kind Englishman lived, right in the midst of the natives. And you reached Calcutta safely at last? Yes, safely. Oh, when I knew I had only 2 days' journey more before me, I could not help it, ma'am. It might be idolatry, I cannot tell, but I was near one of the native temples, and I went into it with my baby to thank God for his great mercy, for it seemed to me that where others had prayed before to their God, in their joy or their agony, was of itself a sacred place. And I got as servant to an invalid lady, who grew quite fond of my baby aboard ship, and in 2 years' time Sam earned his discharge and came home to me and to our child. Then he had to fix on a trade, but he knew of none. And once upon a time, he had learnt some tricks from an Indian juggler. So he set up conjuring, and it answered so well that he took Thomas to help him, as his man, you know, not as another conjurer, though Thomas has set it up now on his own hook. But it has been a great help to us, that likeness between the twins, and made a good many tricks go off well that they made up together. And Thomas is a good brother, only he has not the fine carriage of my husband, so that I can't think how he can be taken for Signor Brunoni himself, as he says he is. Poor little Phoebe, said I, my thoughts going back to the baby she carried all those 100 miles. Ah, you may think so. I never thought I should have reared her, though, when she fell ill at Chundirabad. But that good kind Aga Jenkyns took us in, which I believe was the very saving of her. Jenkyns, said I. Yes, Jenkyns. I shall think all people of that name are kind, for here is that nice old lady who comes every day to take Phoebe a walk. But an idea had flashed through my head. Could the Aga Jenkyns be the lost Peter? True, he was reported by many to be dead, but, equally true, some had said that he had arrived at the dignity of Great Lama of Tibet. Miss Mattie thought he was alive. I would make further inquiry. End of chapter 11.
All right. Peter. Maybe. Huh. Who'd have thunk? Wasn't that story just crazy? About walking with a newborn all the way to a ship. That blew my mind. And at first I was like, that's not possible. And then I thought, yeah, it is. Yeah, there are lots of stories about people doing crazy stuff like that. But God, 6 children. Oof. Yeah. But her husband was able to come back, which is great. I love how all the women are like, well, he may have been a fine conjurer, but we can't expect him to be good at everything. It's not like he can drive a horse very well. I also love that they call his wife Signora Brunoni, and she's like, "No, really, I like Mrs. Brown much better." It's like, "No, no, no, we're gonna keep calling you the Signora because it's more interesting." Uh, I also loved that once they figured out who he was, and well, even before they knew who he was, but they knew that he was sick and that his family seemed to be their kind of gentility, poor gentility, that they were like, "No, no, no, we're gonna get the doctor. We're gonna get the doctor to come and see you. Even if the doctor does use slang, even if his last name is laughable, we're still gonna get the doctor for you," which I loved. I also loved Miss Maddie's line when they're talking about marriage, and she said, "Well, even if I didn't meet with anyone who wished to marry me now," and as Miss Poole says, "one is never too safe." I would not take him. I hope he would not take it too much to heart, but I could not take him or anyone but the person that I should be married to, and he is dead and gone. And he never knew how it all came about that I said no. And I thought, God, Gaskell, going from very funny to just heartrending. Maddie she dances up to the line of telling us exactly what happened, and she's gonna keep jeting away from that line. It is not something that she is bound to talk about because it has something to do with Deborah, and that is hard. But I love that one is never too safe. You don't know when a man is going to jump out of nowhere and demand that you marry him. Ah. I also loved her description of her brother-in-law, the twin to Signor Brunoni. I loved how she described Thomas trying to do the conjuring tricks and how he wouldn't hold his hand right, and he clumps up his hand like a fist and could hide ever so many balls in there, and I thought, "Oh my gosh, he's probably doing it exactly the same way Miss Pole did," and now we know what she would have looked like. I love it. I love it. So yes. All right. That's everything. It was a short little sweet chapter. Next week gets interesting again. In the meantime, don't forget, send me crafty videos, send me guild information, group information, whatever information you think might be of service to people who are moving to your area or who are there and just haven't gotten out much. Also, don't forget that this month, so it'll be the Thursday following this episode, will be the Princess Bride book party. This is hosted on our Discord. If you are not a premium member, if you are not on Patreon, if you are not at craftlit.com/premium or on the app or a channel member, follow the link in the show notes because you can do like a one-time I want to join thing. And that process will take you through to signing up on the Discord so that you can come into the online, room, quote unquote, and hang with us to talk about The Princess Bride. The book is so different from the movie. You are going to be so happy if you come. I am excited. And then July we will watch Princess Bride the movie as our watch party. And I think that's it. You take care of yourself. Have a great week. I am going to go back to bed. I will have a great week, and I'll talk to you soon. Take care. Have a great one. Bye. You can find show notes for this episode and links to other episodes at craftlit.com. CraftLit also appears anywhere you can get a podcast: iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and on, including its own dedicated app. There are lots of ways to support CraftLit, from patreon.com/craftlit to craftlit.com memberships and channel memberships on YouTube. You can find out more details at craftlit.com/premium. And as always, thank you for your support. And remember, if your hands are too busy to pick up a book, at least you can turn one on.